One, two, right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here for this panel on women power that will be moderated today by Rachel Felder. I wish you a very nice session, and I leave you into the expert hands of Rachel. Rachel, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I have to say, I commute between New York and Miami, and it makes me so happy to see how vibrant it is today and how many watch lovers are here in my half hometown, so yay. So we have a very illustrious panel here, and everyone has a different field of expertise, which should make this a quite lively discussion. So maybe I'll have each of the panelists introduce themselves.
Sure. Hi, I'm Josh Shanks. I'm the U.S. Managing Editor for Watchonista. We're an online magazine about watches.
I'm Roberta Naas, and I'm a full-time freelance journalist about watches for 35 years, and I've authored 6 books on watches.
I'm Elysze, and I am a stylist and the fashion editor for Miami Herald's Indulge magazine.
Hi, I'm Fabienne Lupo. I'm the chairwoman, managing director of the Fondation de la Haute Horlogerie, so the organizer of this incredible event.
Hi, I'm Greg Simonian. I'm a watch retailer. We have stores in Southern California, Las Vegas, South Florida, and New York.
And I'm Rachel, and I write about watches and fashion and beauty for a few outlets, including the New York Times. And I write books, and my next book comes out in April, and it's about red lipstick. A very important topic. But today's topic is women and the watch world. So I actually wanted to start with you, Greg. Can women save the watch industry? I mean, are you noticing more female customers, and are the watches that you carry, are you noticing that they're resonating more with women?
So I do see more female consumers, and I think that's directly correlated to watches having a marketing campaign directed towards women. I think the reason that maybe in luxury it's skewed is because it's always been a focus on men. I can take one example. We have multiple Audemars Piguet boutiques, and about a few years ago, Audemars Piguet decided to make a concentrated effort on ladies' pieces, and you saw the customers coming in, but it wasn't watches designed specifically for women. It was the watches that were being purchased were similar models, just in smaller sizes. So it was just a shift in sort of the feel of the marketing and the advertising.
So for you guys, the watch journalists on the panel, I mean, I guess I am too, but yes, do you feel that the marketing of the watches is a key part of this?
Absolutely. I think we've seen so many changes over the years of the way that the brands market to women. And I think to see the shift that should be taking place right now is that they should be marketing to women about watches that matter to women, not watches they think matter to women. So, it's not, everything isn't just diamonds and pretty mother of pearl dials, and women want substance. And I think the marketing has to reflect, we have substance here for you. We have something more, we have complications, we have items you want, and not belittle women or talk down to women.
I have to say, I think this is a big issue. I feel like women are substantial people, and they don't just want a few diamonds around the dial, that is not a beautiful women's watch to a woman. And this concept that a woman won't be interested in the geekiness of the complications. I mean, I love to geek out on those complications, and I know I'm not alone. And I feel like that's short-sighted, that is what a lot of brands are missing.
Right.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think a lot of brands almost speak down to women, and we see press releases every single day, and this is a new romantic complication, or this is a new poetic complication, and in the end, it's another diamond-studded watch with a quartz movement. And I think, to your point, so many more women are interested in complicated watches. We see Bulgari's released a minute repeater for women. That's huge. That's fantastic. And there's so many other brands now that are venturing more into mechanically focused watches for women because there's certainly an appetite for it. Yeah.
Right. Fabienne, you see so many brands. Are you noticing this shift in watches that are being made to appeal to women, that it's changing?
For sure, this is a big opportunity of business because I remember you that we are half of the humanity, and it's too bad to not to address this clientele. So yes, more and more brands are aware that there is a big market to take. And there are more and more to develop specific collection and no more, let's say, smaller watches, male watches for women. But there are still very few. There are still very few because, I don't know why, but probably because male makes watches for male, and probably there is not enough top executive, women top executive in the brands, and also in the designers, in the conceptors of the watches, and so yes, there is a trend, but for the time being, I think it's still very slow.
I mean, this is a good point you bring up. And by the way, this is going to be a very conversational panel. If you please interrupt each other, I encourage you to do that. But the fact that the watch companies, for the most part, are run by men and the watches are designed by men. It's like, I write about fashion, as I know you do, and I feel like with female clothing designers, often there are these nuances of fit and utilitarianism that, like, you could tell that a woman was thinking about this stuff, you know? Yeah. And I feel like one of the tragic flaws right now in the industry is that so many of the women's watches are created by men that are kind of guessing or asking their wives or girlfriends what do you think people will like, and that's not the right way to go about it, really.
Yeah. I think that the big shift started to happen amongst real people. When women started to wear their husband's or their boyfriend's watch, and then all of a sudden became intrigued, oh my goodness, by its functionality, this has seconds, this has, time, this has more than just, a glance at their watch for a moment. And then, but I think women are more inclined than men. Men are more pragmatic shoppers. I shop with both men and women, and I style for editorial and profiles, both men and women.
But she's also being rather modest. Basically, if you see a stylish, high net worth person in Miami, chances are she's chosen their clothing for them.
Thank you. But I cannot tell you how many people I say, well, you need a watch. You can't be standing at your boardroom table or in front of all the law books, and you're standing there with a short sleeve or sleeveless dress on, and you're the CEO or you're the partner, and you don't have a fabulous watch on. A fabulous watch denotes I'm large and in charge. I'm a woman. I have status. I'm here, and I pay attention to what time it is, whether it's mine or yours. And it really is more than a status symbol. If when I consult with women on their personal style, number one, I say, get a good watch, get a good day watch. And they say, well, I wear my husband's watch. And I said to one recently, so does your daughter. So does your daughter. So you're trading off on a watch because you think it's trendy. But at the same time, you need a wardrobe of watches because women are more inclined to buy for the occasion. And just in looking at watches that the women are wearing, the men's watches, they're not cognizant some are not cognizant when they want to trade off on the proportion. So you see a woman with a small wrist, and she's talking, and all you see is this giant face, and you know it's her husband's watch. I think that one of the things that the male designers at watch companies need to take into consideration is proportion. There's 1,000 different sizes to women's wrists. And take into proportion, your idea of a medium or a large is not the same as who really is wearing the watch. So who's wearing the watch?
I think that's a really interesting point, who's wearing the watch and the size of the watch, taking the proportion into consideration. When I saw a big shift in our business and our ladies' sales increased about 23-24% over the past few years. And you saw mid-sized watches becoming more and more popular. mid-sized watches which were meant for men or for women. So it was more options, and then just wearing a dainty little watch or not necessarily wearing your husband's watch. I think that was a way to speak to women.
Well, and also with unisex watches, that came about because there was a significant lack of attractive watches for women. You know, I don't know how many ladies I see wear a Rolex Daytona, and you know, and it happens every day. But that exists because it's a gorgeous watch, but also try to find something of that price point for women that's mechanical, that's not fully studded with diamonds.
I think it goes back to that whole watches of substance, because women do want watches of substance, watches that are mechanical and that have something more. I personally love wearing a big watch, so I don't care about size. I hate small watches. I really care that the mechanics show. I saw some beautiful watches walking around here today, skeleton watches that women can wear, tourbillons, minute repeaters, and any woman can wear a 40 millimeter watch. You know, I mean, really, it's just about being bold. It's about being able to be confident that you have something on your wrist that's really impressive. And so I think the size is not as important. And I personally feel that a lot of the smaller watches we're seeing right now are the result of that big shift to satisfy the Asian market. And I don't believe that it's here to stay.
That's a good point. I think a lot of watches being named mid-sized watches were originally marketed towards women, but also served to serve the Asian market, right? But what do you think about the complications in terms of design, having a more feminine design, a watch designed for women like a Bulgari Serpenti? But the mechanics is relatively simple, but there's a lot of R&D and a lot of research behind the design aspect of it. I mean, building that watch is incredibly complex, but not necessarily in the mechanism of the watch.
I agree with you, and I think that there's really a space for all of those beautiful quartz watches and the highly designed that are very unusual. I saw some here that are mind-boggling, and they have a quartz movement inside of them. So I do think there's a place for that, and it's certainly for people who are buying multiple luxury watches like your clients.
Just in terms of the watch, there's women also like a 2-for-1, so to speak. I mean, who doesn't? Really, gift with purchase. But another aspect of that is it's also a bracelet. So that's one of the things. That's why occasion watches amongst a certain luxury market are such a big focus, because it is major jewelry, it's high jewelry. And what Van Cleef and Savan and Bulgari are doing right now with their high jewelry watches is nothing short of art. They're incredible and they're beautiful. And as you know, just yesterday, which when I was asked to be on this panel, just yesterday I styled a luxury shoot, 10 pages, and I had 11 watches. And it just so happened because I wanted to show it was all couture and it was high-end, and it was, and I matched a watch with each thing, with every single outfit, because a woman that can afford to wear this dress, she has a few watches. And I take into consideration the character rather than the 20-year-old model. So the women that in fashion shows and runway shows, that's another example to market, because I did a runway show where the designer had a certain jewelry company, and they came over with major diamond necklaces, and I was trying to explain the woman who was buying this dress has a watch wardrobe. Why? I mean, you have watches. Why aren't you bringing watches?
You don't expect a powerful executive woman to not have a watch from like one of the brands here, you know, and you don't expect to go out in the evening if you're going to a gala or something and not see a beautiful watch on someone's wrist. And no disrespect to like an Apple Watch, but it's not what you expect to see if you're wearing a Oscar de la Renta ball gown, or if you're wearing the most exquisite, you know, vintage Saint Laurent tuxedo. It's just not, you know, doesn't go together. Tell us a little bit more about that shoot, because you and I talked about it a little, and I just found it fascinating how you decided which brands and how everything worked together between the clothing and the watches, because that's a big part of the women's fashion market, really.
It was based on more the focus was the couture wardrobe, and the focus for me was to show the different, the jewelry to wear with these different ensembles. So I wasn't going to put the Van Cleef bejeweled high jewelry watch with the Fendi suit.
Right.
So with that, I paired a Tiffany tank because she's not going to a gala at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that was a big consideration, and it also had to do with the design and the lines and the proportion of what each outfit that I picked. And I got to work with some of the watches that I didn't get to work with at that runway show. So that was wonderful. But it really has so much to do. Every single outfit was different, every single one of them. And I was very fortunate to get to work with some of the greatest brands you've seen today. I mean, I had an Oscar de la Renta with the Piaget Gala watch because it added to the rose gold. I mean, it was a rose gold watch. So I think that's another way that the watch companies are coming up with different things to do it, whether it's also the mechanisms, but it's also the metals in the jewelry used, so that men, again, are more pragmatic, and they will, when I shop with men or when I even style men for it, it has to be depending on which way they're standing so that the watch shows. And that's really how it goes. But at the same time, there's such a variety of watches that are available to women. I don't think people even know. Even people sitting here, I don't know if you know how many extraordinary watches that are a cross between high jewelry, high art, and just fabulous fashion that are out there.
Well, part of the issue, I think, is that at the fashion magazines, there's not usually someone with real watch expertise. If you look at a magazine like Vogue, Glamour, Bazaar, all those kind of magazines, it's not like they have a dedicated watch editor. So usually it's someone who's covering a lot of different types of accessories, and also is probably not given the pages in the magazine to do a long piece about, trends in women's watches in general. And that's so that your average consumer, unless they, decide that they're going to spend an afternoon browsing, maybe doesn't know that these watches exist.
But I think, the other thing is, I want to revisit one thing you said before I go on. Women in the watch industry. When I joined the watch industry, I can count one person in America who was a woman in charge of a brand. And over the years, we've seen that grow. Now we have maybe 2 handfuls of women in charge of the brands in America. When I walk the hallowed halls of the watchmakers, I'm now seeing female designers. I'm seeing female watchmakers.
That's huge.
We're seeing, it's very small. I mean, it's still 1/10, if that, of the population.
But that's a big step in the right direction.
Absolutely, and they're bringing in their ideas as well. And maybe they're opening some eyes of the men involved in the industry to say, hey, it doesn't have to be small, mother of pearl and diamond. It can be a ceramic white skeleton watch or something else of substance. So there is that shift going on. Right. And I think it's really important to continue to encourage young women today entering careers to think about watchmaking.
Absolutely.
So that I wanted to go back to that point.
And to your point, Roberta and I were speaking earlier, as it pertains to publishing, there are predominantly most of the watch publications are catered towards men. And specialized fashion publications may not have a dedicated watch editor, in-house. There's certainly an appetite for these articles. We're seeing the traffic. We're seeing people come in and they want to read this. So I think it's really about having that shift and bringing more women into that role. But also, we need to be writing more about this. It's not just, we can't just be a straight male-only publication. We need to kind of split that. Whereas we may have a higher audience of men that read our magazine, there's certainly plenty of women out there, and there's certainly an appetite to learn more. And I think the more that we can show and the more that we can raise awareness of that,
Right.
It's only going to help.
I wrote Jewels of Time. It's a book on women's watches, and I wrote it ahead of its time because that was 7 or 8 years ago now. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that women in the watch industry, even as a journalist, there are very few of us. I broke the door open many years ago for women being the first female watch editor in America. But you're right about the fact that the traffic is an issue, because if we do publish about women's watches for the sites that I write for, there isn't as much traffic online going to those articles. So you have less female watch coverage than men's, because men's watches are the draw.
It's traffic driven. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also if you look at the amount of watches out there, there's so many more men's watches or unisex that veer a little bigger than you might imagine on a women's wrist than specifically women's watches. So I guess that's some of it too.
I think that's another line of distinction that's blurring. I don't know that we have to have men's watches and women's watches. I don't know that we have to call them unisex watches. I think women have always had the opportunity to double dip. They can go in and they can buy a beautiful diamond watch, and they can also go in and buy, another brand that maybe somebody else might say that's a men's watch. Men can't do that. They can only buy what works for them.
As much as we try. Yeah.
I know you had that diamond watch on the other day.
I have to say, I was saying to someone earlier today, I think there's nothing chicer than a tall, manly man with a small watch. And you were talking about the sizes of the faces, and of course, in the vintage world, watch faces have gotten so much progressively bigger, and now there's, massive ones. And if you go vintage, you sort of by definition often are going towards a smaller face. And I just think on a man that looks so chic and so confident. And there's that too, Yeah.
I do want to say also on the occasion watches, they should be bigger. All right? They should be bigger. Because if a woman is buying a watch that is for an occasion, and it's a gala watch or it's a very special event watch, she doesn't need a tiny little diamond watch, because in holding her handbag, that doesn't always show up. So at the same time, an occasion watch should not be a dainty little diamond watch. It should be a big, massive diamond watch.
Well, we always want big, massive diamond watches.
But that's just the other side of the coin, because to get out of their head the size of the watch, because on as we just talked about the Asian market that you referred to, for their large watches, they're buying the mid-size watches. So, and it's all about proportion on the wrist. But I think that there shouldn't be just 3 sizes. It should be genderless anyway, if you're going to do an everyday watch or an everyday watch. Yeah. It should be genderless, and there should be, 5 different sizes, and it should be proportional to the person that wants to buy it. And I think in that way, you'll attract more women.
And there are some brands doing that. With IWC, we're seeing anywhere from 31, 32 millimeter pilots to 34, 36, 40, and all the way up to, I think they make a 51 millimeter even. But they have this wide range and a wide range of choice, all mechanical, and we're seeing some of these watches where predominantly they are, they definitely have a masculine theme, but many women are still interested in a white dial IWC pilot, and it's $3,500 and, it's perfect.
Right. The thing also, I think for women, there's a confidence level question too. I'm a very petite person. I don't know if anybody saw me standing up. I'm 5 foot even on a good day if I poof up my hair. And I wear a big man's watch, and I love it. I think of it as a bracelet as much as a watch. When I wear it, I don't have to think about bracelets. It's just on, and I think there's a different kind of woman that wants something that's maybe a little more traditional or softer or less statement-y, but maybe at night you want something that's more statement-y. It begs the question, and I ask all of you this, are there brands that are doing this better than others? Brands that are, like you mentioned IWC with the offerings, are there certain brands that are offering things that do look like they're resonating well with female customers?
Well, I can speak to as a retailer, the brands that have, let's say, over a quarter of their sales that I carry that are ladies, other than the obvious ones maybe, Breguet and Bulgari, which make watches specific for women that don't really cross into the men's category, the Queen of Naples and the Serpenti and Lucia. But the ones that have sort of similar look for a men's or a ladies watch, or let's say a smaller size for ladies, over 25% of my sales, I would say Audemars Piguet, Hublot, and Tag Heuer is actually over 30% ladies. And those are brands that made a concerted effort to sell to women. And another point, when brands do that, they're not cannibalizing other sales. They're increasing their market. These are additional sales every single time. It's a really smart direction for any brand to go. And you see a direct correlation between the marketing of them and the sales.
Well, right. I mean, you know, the watch brands so much think about let's expand into this country or this market. The economy's flattening, so we're having an issue, you know. But yes, the women want to buy watches, so why not make watches that the women will want to buy?
They're made, but why not also market them specifically to women?
Correct.
Right.
Right.
I think on that note, if you want to market specifically to women, then talk to the accessory editors. And because when there's accessory markets or accessory pulls for a magazine or a shoot or a show, the accessories that are brought in are not watches because they're not being marketed to. They're not being shown. They're not at the accessory markets. Women see watches as accessories also, especially. I mean, it is an accessory, whether it's an occasion watch or an everyday watch or their husband or boyfriend's watch or, you know, part of their wardrobe of watches. It is an accessory, and which I think is wonderful, and also that women are getting more involved in the intricate details of the watches, like the mechanisms and...
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. Before today, I've never heard of a woman matching her watch to her handbag. And I'm a person who buys watches for a watch store, you know?
Right. So I have a question, Greg, for you. I'm curious. Because now with the internet and access and all of this information that everyone has immediate access to, are you finding that your female customers are coming in more knowledgeable already? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No. It's a great question. I think all my customers are coming in more knowledgeable across the board. I mean, when it used to be that the salesman is the authority, and now the salesperson, is always questioned, right?
Right. Well, that's the internet. I mean, thank you guys, because that's, you know, people do come in, I think, having done a lot of research online, and that's women, men, anybody, I think. Yeah.
I get a lot of questions from women on my site, even though my site I write, you know, it's minimal traffic in terms of who I get questions from, but I get a lot of questions from women, to the point where I started another site, Watch Seduction, for women, which it's too hard to keep up everything I do. So, but the point is, I get a lot of questions from women who want to know. They're not afraid to email and say, hey, I have a question, I saw your article. And a lot of the questions are not about a so-called women's watch. I really hate that we're calling watches men's and women's, but a lot of times it's just about something technical that they want to understand more, and they feel they're, one particular woman, her husband was a collector, and she didn't understand a lot of the terminology and the lingo, and she didn't want to ask him because she didn't want to look stupid.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that more women are reading, more women are looking into, investigating, trying to find out about more mechanical watches.
And it also goes back to the marketing point, if we could circle back on that. So many of these brands will come out with a piece that's possibly designed by a man for a woman, and they'll come out with a grand marketing scheme to say, hey, this has been years in development, and this is exactly the watch that women want. And then you look back and you're like, you know, you could have spent maybe 30 minutes in a focus group with a woman to talk about this watch.
Right. Yeah. And the whole marketing thing, you know, we have brands that are unveiling beautiful new watches for women, typically with, you know, a moon phase complication because it's romantic and it's mystery and that's what they think women want. But then they're dropping the ball when it comes to their advertising and their marketing campaigns because they're going right back to the old way of, oh, isn't this a beautiful watch? Instead of saying, you know, this watch is engineered for women. This watch is technically designed for women. It's okay to give your marketing campaign substance and to bring that into the picture.
I agree. It's funny that we're in such an empowered world, and then you see some of the women's watch advertisements, and it's like we're back to 1950.
Yeah.
You know, where you're like the wife that's supposed to be cooking the meal and having the slippers and the whiskey sour ready for your husband when he gets home from the office. It's odd. I'm wondering if any of you feel that some of the brands that have more of a jewelry tradition, like Cartier or Bulgari, or these type of brands, do a better job at this than the ones that have more of a traditional watch tradition.
Yes. No,
Would you like to elaborate?
They definitely do, and a lot of that has to do with the overall brand that has been built. I mean, you look at the partnerships that some of the other brands have formed and which brands they partner with. You know, Hublot and Ferrari, or Breitling and Bentley, or or Rogerboui and Lamborghini, those all speak more and more to the men's world, right? And you don't see those same kind of partnerships, or you don't see the same kind of partnerships in a brand like Bulgari or Cartier.
Well, also, what the brands could make the effort is to have more women, more female celebrities as their spokesperson.
Yeah.
That's very important.
And actually have the woman wear the watch, because
and
we see a
have
lot
her
of
wear the
yeah,
watch.
yeah.
But what happens is that in some of the advertising, you have a gorgeous model, so pretty, isn't she pretty, wearing a very complicated watch. But when I work with, and I style a lot of editorials, and I work with male celebrities, and they are locked tight into a contract. And they say, I'm sorry, if I'm wearing a watch, this is my contract, this is what I have to wear, and this is the watch. Whereas when I'm styling a woman and I'm putting a watch, even a female celebrity, she's not under any contract. She doesn't care which watch she wears as long as it goes with the outfit, because the brands are focusing on, a lot of them are focusing on models as their spokesperson and not a celebrity who's locked in. And then there are so many female celebrities that you see them on the cover shoots and everything, and they're not wearing a watch. Whereas these guys are doing fabulously under contract with the watch companies and sticking to it.
Well,
Do you think part of sorry.
Go on, sorry. No, go ahead.
Do you think part of that is brands trying to market female watches to men to buy for women?
See, I think part of it is that the deal makers, the agents and the lawyers, when they think, if you're representing a sports figure, you think of watches, that's an immediate thing you think of. And then when you think of your female clients, I think you think more towards, it's just a stereotype, but it would be common that you think about a hair care endorsement or a makeup endorsement, or let's call L'Oreal or something. And I think it probably goes both sides, that they don't think so automatically about calling a watch brand.
But I do think that some of the watch brands are focusing more now and trying to get women athletes, women sports figures, not just a model and a TV star, because even though everybody cares what the TV stars wear, I think certain of the brands really need to position their watches as sport watches for women as well.
Yeah.
And they're jumping on board.
There are a lot of
We
brands
see
that still do that. I mean, Audemars Piguet does an incredible job of, kind of having both sides of the aisle, and you have both men and women, powerful, athletes, and it's phenomenal. Yeah.
I'm wondering, with the Oscars coming up next weekend, like the red carpet is such a thing. Do you feel like there's more women on the red carpet wearing watches? Do you feel like do you feel that's impactful?
This is a story I do every year for Forbes. We take a look at what everybody's wearing, the men and the women on the red carpet. But the problem with that is a lot of those are paid placements, right? Some are not. To be fair, some are not. But it does make it very difficult to say, wow, it's wonderful that she was wearing this watch if it was a paid placement. On the other hand, I think it's really important that we have those stories. It's one of my high traffic stories on Forbes, because people want to know what everybody's wearing. And I don't think they care that it's paid.
I was going to say, I don't think your average consumer, the morning after the Oscars, is connecting dots over what's paid and what's not. I mean, it's sad, but they probably aren't. I wanted to bring up that one of the retailers that I think is doing a very good job with women's watches is Net-a-Porter, because they present those watches as a fashion accessory as much as anything else. And I've been sort of following and written a couple times about the watch and fine jewelry business on both Net-a-Porter and Mr. Porter. I find it fascinating because personally, I mean, I don't spend $10,000 on much in life except for a down payment on an apartment, and I can't imagine spending that kind of money online, just impulse, unless I'd had a lot of vodka, and those retailers, well, it's one, sister brother retailer, Mr. Porter, Net-a-Porter. They're doing a very healthy business with fine jewelry and watches on both sides. And I think it's a trusted place for people to buy, but I think also they present watches to women as an accessory, as a fashion accessory, and you can imagine it in the same thought process as the dress and the shoes. So.
I think what's fascinating is that you brought up Net-a-Porter because in their research, in their market research, they started tracking, they're owned by the same company, so they started tracking the amount of watches that were being bought on Mr. Porter and following who was buying them. A lot of women were buying men's watches as a fashion accessory. And that's how it really started. You could have even written that, but that's how it started. And it's fascinating to see the watches because, a woman would look for, I'll go on Mr. Porter, it's the same site, and I'll see what I can get my husband. Oh my God, I love this. This is perfect for me. It goes with what I have, which is another thing for the accessory. There's so many watches that go with everything, which is what women really want. They walk into a store and they say, I really want something to go with everything. I want this handbag that goes with everything, hence the Birkin. But I want it to go with everything. But in the long run, what they really want is just one thing that goes with everything, and they want to have a lot of everything else, and who doesn't? But that's really how that started. And I think Net-a-Porter took that up and ran with it, and are doing fabulously well with the fashion brands and the watch brands.
With your female clients, because they are kind of like the demographic of customer we're talking about, are you noticing women leaning towards one type of watch over another?
It depends. I think for an everyday watch, I think they're going to Bulgari. I do. And I think that for the occasion watches, they're going to the Harry Winstons, the Van Cleef. I think that the Cartier is timeless.
Right.
And that's where I see a few women with their collections, that they, across the board, they see that they have collections of the everyday watch with Cartier. But in the long run, they want to do more of occasion watches. And the reason that I said that earlier about bigger watches for occasion is can't tell you how many times I've been with a woman, she goes, I want this size watch with this size rubies. That would be great,
Yeah.
But instead, here she has this medium-sized watch, which is marketed as a medium, but on her it's large. And then there's this tiny little, with a flip watch that's a major piece, major jewelry piece, but it's still not, it's pretty, but it's still your grandmother's size.
I think you've identified a new market opportunity, bespoke women's watches. Yeah.
We have them. Siobhan has them now here. Siobhan has beautiful ones.
Go on.
I'm sorry. I just, the one thing that I want to keep in mind, or that I think the whole market has to address, is you are servicing really high wealth clients, and they're buying only a certain percentage of the timepieces being made. And while a lot of women look to watches as an accessory at the fashion end of the price scale and the under $5,000 watches, there's this whole gap in between the $5,000 to $30,000 watches that everybody has to market to. That's where the real volume is going to come from. And so I think that some of these brands you mentioned that are the jewelry brands, and the Cartier and the Van Cleefs and the Harry Winstons, I don't know that the average person out there making an average salary or maybe an above average salary is going to be able to purchase them. And so I think they're looking at the more mainstream, I want to buy myself a beautiful $20,000 watch that will go with everything.
But it's that drives the aspiration for the watches, though, as well, right? So you may aspire to one day own a Van Cleef & Arpels, but then you also might lust after a Cartier tank.
Right.
Right.
And I think that duality is really what drives that market.
But at the same time, that's a small percentage of my actual business. I really do have the women in the boardroom, and they're not at the head of the table. Okay, so I have also the soccer moms and the attorneys and the judges and the politicians who can't wear a flashy watch, but they still want it to be functional, look presentable, be appropriate, and still look. Still have a tad, not the politicians, they can't have the status symbol, but they still want to have that appearance of accessibility and knowledge and professionalism. So a bulk also of my business is the professional woman who, does want that to go with everything.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, watches have semiotic value. They give off a million messages about you and your taste and your confidence level and your connoisseurship. And I think that's kind of what you're saying, that if you're an executive, you want to wear a watch that communicates authority, confidence, achievement, and perhaps that's the women's watch that is the least blingy but the most, refined. Yeah.
I will tell you one comment that I did hear from someone. It's who was in my client. The attorney told me this, is that they actually said to her, if you're by the hour, how do you know when the hour is up? I mean, you're not even wearing a watch. I mean, she said, that's why she wanted my input on a watch that would be status. She said, he actually said to me, you're by the hour. I'm not seeing any, how do you know? I mean, is there an egg, the egg thing here or what? And she sought my counsel on what watch should she have to just at least look professional. And we really went for a, very mid-brand, but that it went with everything she had.
Right. Fabienne, I wanted to ask you, because you deal with brands, you deal with the world. In organizing your events, you deal with people come in from all around the world, and you have an international focus. Are there countries in which the women's watch market is healthier than others, or places in the world that you feel this is going better than other places?
Sorry, you mean for women?
For women's watches, I mean, do you feel that the Asian market is, I know that smaller watches tend to do well in Asia, but are there other places in the world that you feel that the women's market is thriving in a way that hopefully eventually it can thrive that way here?
Well, definitely, I think it's Asia and China. So China is driving, of course, all the business of our industry, and also for the women collection. Especially because now we are assisting to a new generation of very powerful women in Asia and in China in particular. They are very rich, and they want to buy complicated and really very high-end watches. So yes, probably China is the most accurate market for women, for women collection.
And coincidentally, it's a place where small watches, more women's-sized watches.
And it's why also this is the trend to have smaller watches because of China.
Right.
Because of China. But I have a question for you, because I think that sometimes watches used to be toys for boys, okay? Like cars, like motorbikes, like boats. And I know that more and more, or usually, women are kind of prescriptor for men, for buying such a car, or this one, or this other one. What about watches? Are there really, sometimes they buy watches for their men, and they buy this watch because they want to wear it. So it's why I think our industry need to address the women, because we are also probably the biggest prescriptor for men purchase. So I would like to listen to you. What about, well, of course, not the watch collectors. They know what they want to buy.
Right.
But let's speak about the general men, let's say normal men. I'm sure that they listen a lot to their women.
I think definitely for this doesn't apply to all men. For many married men, a large purchase, especially if it's a non-collector, somebody's making a one-time purchase of an aspirational piece, something they've been looking at, it's very much a family decision. I think that's just a normal thing in a lot of relationships, that when you're spending that kind of money, if it's a real significant purchase for you, I think most men, they talk to their wives about it, especially in a traditional retail setting. They'll come in the store.
I totally agree. My wife is sitting here, and normally any purchase that I make, she makes, over a couple $100, you're going to talk about it as a family, and you're going to talk about that. But 9 times out of 10, when I buy the watch, it always ends up on her wrist. So
eventually, and then on the kids' wrist. I mean, it is a family purchase.
That isn't to say that some men hide the purchases from their wives too.
Right, exactly. Well, we have time for some questions. Are there any questions from the audience? There's a question.
Just curious for the panelists. A lot of the history we look at is recent history, yet with men's watches, history is such a critical marketing tool. But when you look at the history of watchmaking, it's a woman's game. The history of watches since the Renaissance has been about women. Catherine the Great was the first modern collector of watches. Caroline Murat was Breguet's biggest collector. Queen Victoria popularized so many different types of watch styles and forms, her association with Patek Philippe and others. Do you think that we're missing a moment here? Do you think that this aspect of the real history of watches would help drive this market of pushing women in watches?
Absolutely.
Yes,
I think we need
yes.
that history to be brought forward. And I think, when brands look into their archives to find inspiration, that should be a driving point. That should be important. It should be a part of the marketing. It should be historically so-and-so loved this. And so I think so.
I think we're so focused on celebrity culture now, and we're so focused on getting on Kim Kardashian's wrists and not looking back at, Marie Antoinette, and I think that there's such a great divide there that brands could really capitalize on.
Absolutely, but some of it comes down to what we were saying earlier, like women's magazines don't want to run pictures of Marie Antoinette, and there's not that many watch writers or writers for the fashion magazines with expertise, deep knowledge of that history, so.
So I think it was Elysze that made a comment about the bold watch for the woman in the boardroom. Would you make suggestions as to what maybe somebody in that kind of position should be looking towards, should be looking for?
I think a lot of that is really, it's the same thing we say to anybody buying a watch. You have to buy what you love. You have to buy what calls to you. And I think another part of the answer there is, of course, what is the price point? Because I can say, go buy an Audemars Piguet, go buy a Bulgari. Maybe you will have the budget and you're going to buy a Zenith. It's hard to answer, but I'm going to let you do this. But I feel like if you want to make a statement, you go for the best timepiece in the price category that you have, that you love, and that will make the statement you want to make. I'm not copping out, it's hard to know, it's hard to answer the question without knowing a price point and a realm.
I think a point to make, if you're looking for a watch, that would reflect your status and your aspirations and your price point, I think it's important to look at what you already have. Even though women don't talk about it a lot of women don't like to mix their metals, so to speak. And if you predominantly go towards a gold jewelry or a gold belt, a gold something, then look at a two-tone bracelet. A two-tone bracelet watch so that you can wear it with either. That's just a suggestion because a lot of women they don't really like to mix their metals. That's why I wear, both my everyday things are two-toned. So then I don't have to think that much about it. But women it's really important to look at what your eye does go to begin with. So if you want a high price point watch and you predominantly love silver, then go for the platinum. It really makes a difference to what you already like. So know that before you go in, and know what you already have and what you're attracted to before you go in and do the research of yourself.
Right, and the nice thing is online, you could just do all the research sitting in your bed. The other thing is, and it might be a sort of uncouth thing to say with all these boutiques here, but with so many brands, you can buy vintage and it's a lot more affordable, and with a quality brand from a quality dealer, you can get something really impactful for a lot less money.
And we're seeing a lot more vintage, women that want vintage birth year watches, vintage watches that their father or grandfather owned, and they're smaller case sizes, so they're fantastic. But you're seeing a lot more of that, and I think more and more brands are also embracing their heritage though too, and allowing access to vintage pieces, and even having their own boutiques for vintage and bringing those into the shop.
That's absolutely right. And you know, sites just like there's Net-a-Porter, resale designer sites like the Real and Vestiaire Collective, you see watches on there too. So there's definitely a market for those. They're easy to find if you know where to look.
No, I was just going to comment on what you said. You could do all the research online at home now, but nothing beats going into a store and seeing, touching, feeling, getting a good look at that watch.
And as much as research as you can do online, you can't feel if it feels too heavy on your wrist, or if you feel like I wear my watch looser than someone might choose to because I like it that way, but I wouldn't know that if I was buying online. Yeah. Any other questions? I guess that's a no. Are there any other things that you guys feel we should discuss on this subject? I have to say, I'm very glad to talk about it because sometimes as a female watch geek, I feel a little awkward. And I do think that some of the watch stores, the environment feels very male, feels very cigar and leather and car aficionado, which is not my thing. And I do think there is a type of female watch consumer that doesn't feel particularly embraced in that atmosphere, although it's changing. And if you see some of the newer stores, that is an evolution. It is. And one of the things that I see as a disconnect is, so we live in this world where everybody, female and male, are concerned with like the provenance of where their lettuce was grown, and is opting for like vinyl on an old school turntable recorded on analog equipment instead of a download. And to me, there's a certain tier of watchmaking that should have the same exact appeal. Like, I don't really need a watch to keep time because I have my phone on me, but I want this connoisseur craftsperson thing that's made in the best possible way, in a hand-touched, thoughtful way. And women, you know, are into the other things I mentioned as much as men are, and I feel like this part of the appeal to women is huge and really underserviced at the moment.
I agree with you. I think, you know, women want that. I think, you know, when you look at Red Bar Crew, for instance, and Kathleen, who's a co-founder and is a collector, and I think most of her pieces are really important mechanical pieces. I think that there is a whole spate of women out there who are learning more and want more and are looking for that. And I think the more that the watch brands can market that end of it, the mechanics, the fine engineering, the beauty within, because you want brains and beauty inside and out. And I think that will help drive the market, and more women would be buying those watches.
Absolutely.
You made a point earlier, Roberta, about more women at the head of the companies and more visible at the actual watch companies. And I think with the Can Women Save the Watch Worlds, it's not just the women who are buying the watches. It's also the women who are the associates who are in the store, to be knowledgeable, and you know that the gentleman is here, the associate is selling the watches, but she's over here selling the necklace and the jewelry. I think that's really an important point. And when I pulled for this one story to get all the watches, everyone I spoke to was male in selecting the watches. So I just would, and the people that got back to me to remind me of, you know, and my assistant for pickup times were all female. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think the point of the panel is, can women save the watch world? But I think the answer is an unequivocal yes, because they already have been, and they already have been participating in that for decades, if not centuries. So, no.
I hope to see more women watch journalists. I have to say, you were the maverick, and ahead of your time, yes. And I love going into all those intricacies. I find this world fascinating. I write about other stuff too. I just find this world addictive, and the more you delve in, the more you get. And so I hope we see more women that are that into it, because I think there is a certain passion that comes across in those stories that's perhaps a little different than the way a man would cover these pieces. Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Great work.
Sure.